Now the face frame opening for the drawer is a little bit narrower than the distance between the side and the vertical divider, and that's to accommodate getting the glass in and out of that front pocket, which is be under the drawers. And so I have to make little shims, permanently mounted shims that the drawer will ride against, and each of these is fitted to the that recess between the side and the drawer opening. So now I'm just going to glue these shims in place, and I marked the location for them before I took apart the dry setup, and so I can glue these in place, and then later on I can glue two drawer runners top and bottom alongside each of these shims. Now I've got a nice big caul that I've made, nice and flat on both sides, and I can take this caul, place it on the work, and then clamp the work to my bench and let that glue set. This caul will give you nice even pressure on this piece. I've got the pieces all built. Here you can see where the drawer glides are. I've glued that in place. So basically I've done about everything I can do construction wise, so now it's time to do the dyeing. We'll call this ebonizing. It uses black dye, and I use a combination of a rag and a brush for this water soluble dye. Now this is an aniline dye, so it's made by mixing powdered dye with water, and it's very forgiving because you can come back later and put more dye on, even other colors of dye, and the dyes will dissolve, and so you can darken, you can change shades, all these things, and then finish it. Like I say, it is water soluble. It's mixed in water, so you have to raise the grain before you use this, which we already have done. Okay, so I used a brush to get into the corners. Now I'm going to use a little cotton rag and just wipe it on. You can do this as much as you want to get it just like you like it. I've dyed the inside of the box. I've actually dyed the outside too, but I'm going to do that again once I've finished the assembly. And I wanted to point something out. I'm using black dye, and I'm not sure if the camera is able to pick up this color, but right now it looks brown. But it'll turn much, much darker when we put finish on it. And that's one of the things about dyes, is that the final finish often determines the actual color. And so not to despair if your piece doesn't look like you think it should while you're dyeing it. So I've got some blonde shellac here. It's a little darker than the super blonde, which is good because I'm trying to get darkness. And I'm going to brush some of this. It's 1 pound coat, 1 pound cut. I'm going to brush it on because I want to minimize the disturbance of the dye, and subsequent coats I can rub on with the pad. And this shellac will not only act as the final finish, but it'll also seal in the die. Well, as you can see, I've assembled the sea chest sides, front, back, and finished the dyeing and the shellacking. I also installed a nice solid brass handle from Lee Valley. It's a really nice one. It's made for chests. It stops at the 90-degree point. And now I'm going to cut the glass to go into the two compartments here in the center compartment. And to do that, I've got a sheet of 3/32 glass, single strength window glass. I've laid it on a doubled up blanket here to give me a nice soft but firm base. I've got a straight edge. I've got a good quality glass cutter. I've got a little bit of lubricant. You can use glass cutting oil or a little kerosene, or in my case I had a little diesel, which is very similar to kerosene. And so now I've got to make the marks. This is going to be 6 and 15 or 13/16 in the height. And I've already made a few marks at that. So I'll just take my straight edge and line it up and draw a line, which will kind of help me make sure that I'm not making a mistake as I actually do my cut. And I'm cutting the glass just a 1/16 undersize so that it's sure to fit into the space. Okay, now the straight edge needs to be one that is tall enough that it doesn't interfere with this tiny little wheel. And I'm going to move the camera around to the other side so you can see me cut. Okay, so I'll go ahead and line up my straight edge. Make sure the wheel is on the line. You're going to hold the straight edge down and pull the wheel, the cutter wheel, along the glass, pressing just hard enough to create a score. You can kind of hear it as it cuts in. Then you take the glass and you bring it up to the edge and just pop it off. And there you go. And I took the strips I made for holding the glass into the openings and drilled some countersunk holes for screws. I've got some 1/2-inch screws here. And I'm going to install these, so I marked an arrow to show what front is. And that way when I place these and drill the holes, later on I can go ahead and align them up to the exact holes. Now, to get the spacing between the strip and the frame proper, I just took a piece of scrap glass and wrapped a piece of masking tape around, and that gives me a little bit of extra clearance over the thickness of the glass. The last thing you want is for these strips to pinch the glass, because then the glass is going to break. Don't ask me how I know that. So I go ahead and give that little extra clearance of 2 pieces of tape, and then take a punch here with a nice sharp tip on it, and simply mark where the holes are. Make sure I'm holding that in nice and tightly. Now, it's a little tough to see these holes, unfortunately, with the dark wood, but if you're careful, you can figure out where they are. And then I've got a short driver here with a drill set that actually fits into the hex opening. Makes a nice short drill that I can get into tight spaces like this. And I'll just go ahead and drill a little pilot hole for the thread. Got a little piece of tape to prevent me from going too deep. these, I've made the vertical pieces. In the case of the sides, I've only got a single screw because I know that this is going to, change shape with the seasons a small amount. So in the sides, these long grain strips don't restrict the movement. Now on this tall opening, I had to put 2 screws, but still they're fairly close together. Now these pieces go all the way to the bottom. Then the horizontal strips trap the bottoms of those side pieces in place. Because there's not going to be any movement this way, I can put 2 screws into the horizontal strips with no problem. Now I'm making the board that will fit inside the sea chest on which metals and so forth will be placed. I've taken a piece of hardboard and put a couple of layers of batting on there to give a little softness, and I've installed a piece of masking, which is just some paper, and I've taken the material we're going to use, which is kind of a suede type material, and cut it to size. And the idea is I'll spray some adhesive on here and then fold this over, do the same thing to the other side, and then do the ends. When that's all done, then I'll attach a rectangular piece to cover up the seams and give it a more finished look. Okay, I've used some spray adhesive on here, and I've sprayed these 2 strips, let it sit for about a minute, and then make the bond. It gets a little tacky. Once it gets tacky enough to make a good solid bond. Now I've attached these little tab strips that my wife sewed up for me. So these tabs will stick up on the sides that you can use to pull this on out. And now I'm going to mask off about 1/4 inch or so that when I spray the glue for this filler piece, we don't get any glue on the show part. Now for attaching the back, the first application is the most critical. So I've got to get this lined up perfectly, and I do, and then I can roll the rest of it on out. Let that sit for a minute, and then we'll make the bond. And this is the finished piece. Got tabs on each side to lift the piece out. On the bottom it's covered, so when you do lift it out, it looks nice. You're going to let this sit, let that glue set for several hours, probably just overnight.